From the scariest walkers looming around every corner to some of the craziest apocalyptic scenes ever seen on TV, Fear the Walking Dead has been a much-needed spin-off. And since it's coming to an end, your mind's probably full of questions. But don't worry, Danae Garcia was ready to explain everything. She's among the show's most prominent characters, seeing how she plays Luciana. She had all of the insider information you'd be looking for. Obviously, it's extremely hard to say goodbye to something you've put so much time and energy into, especially when the original Walking Dead also ended pretty recently. This does explain why Garcia was being bombarded with all this curiosity. So, in a bid to clear the air, she took to Instagram to talk about why the show's journey is nearing its end after 8 whopping seasons. And the gist of it was just the simple fact that the show has run its course.
I know you guys heard that this is the last season of Fear the Walking Dead. Yes, I announced it. Everybody kept asking me. And one of the funniest questions I kept asked is like, what happened to Fear the Walking Dead that is ending? Nothing happened. What happened is that we've been on the air for 8 seasons, and we felt like it was a really fun run. So yeah, nothing really happened to Fear. It's just that we've been in the air for quite some time.
Everybody on the team agreed that this is where the story should be wrapped up, which is pretty much the exact opposite of what everybody had assumed. No, nothing terrible happened to the show. In fact, the reason they want to end it here is that they want it to be remembered in a good way. Nobody wants to drag it out to the extent that it starts feeling forced, which, I hate to admit, has happened to some of the greatest shows of all time. You probably shouldn't be bummed out over this, because you'll get to remember it in all its glory. Garcia feels exactly the same way, even though she said that she's enjoyed working with them for so long. I mean, the show has spanned out for almost an entire decade now. And if fans feel like 8 seasons were simply not enough, that's a pretty strong indication that it had everybody hooked on the plot. But then again, every good show knows when it's the right time to end things. It prevents a messy, unsatisfying ending to a brilliant story. Something that nobody ever wants. Not to mention, the cast and crew were also pretty tired of working on the same story and characters for so long. It's important to move on from things when it feels like the right time, and I'm pretty sure that everybody involved wants to focus on different projects too. Now, when it comes to the fans, they may have been expecting something at least as lengthy as the original series, because there's just so much material that they could use to further create complexity in the plots. And things would have still remained interesting enough to make room for a few more seasons. But when you think about spin-offs, not a lot of them make it as far as Fear did, and that's definitely something to be proud of. What you should focus on is the fact that things could have been much worse. A natural ending to the series is in everybody's best interest. I can't even count the number of popular shows that were canceled without warning, leaving fans shattered and heartbroken. Or sometimes, they leave it up to the fans to guess when the end is coming. But seeing how they officially announced this show's ending even before Season 8 was aired is pretty spectacular. Not just that, but they cushioned the hard news by telling everybody that the next season will be structured in 2 sets of 6 episodes each. And that just makes sure that everybody has something to look forward to. What this does is help them avoid an awkward ending full of cliffhangers. And the last thing you'd want from this show is unresolved plot points. There's no drama involved, and nothing has forced the show to end. Instead, they're choosing to do it of their own accord. This is why I'm expecting one of the most well-thought-out endings ever. Plus, there's the fact that The Walking Dead is a literal endless franchise. Even if this spin-off ends, another one's probably popping up real soon. A smooth ending would ensure that the story doesn't just get interrupted out of nowhere with a bad, unplanned one in contrast. But this still doesn't mean that there's no reason to worry, because it's almost impossible to imagine how they'll finally wrap it up. If you can recall the most recent events of the show, you'd have noticed that the focus had shifted almost entirely. Morgan and Strand used to be leading the show, but after most of the Clark family ended up dying, it was pretty much all over the place. It was pretty obvious that they had been struggling to find their footing within all this newness, which is why it was expected that an end would come sooner rather than later. But one thing's absolutely for sure: they won't be able to defeat the Walkers. And while that might piss some of you off, that's just how things are going to be in a franchise as massive as this. They're a consistent threat, and that's how all of the spin-offs get connected to the original show. But whatever happens, I'm pretty sure that the cast and crew will be relieved over the fact that the show wasn't canceled. And yes, that absolutely could have happened. The ratings have been dwindling for quite some time now, but there's a reason for that. They probably got way more ambitious than they should have. I mean, don't get me wrong, when the show first premiered in 2015, it was very different from the actual storyline of the original series. It was all pretty necessary, since that's the entire point of a spin-off. They were super creative with the Clark family, and seeing how they weren't related to people like Rick Grimes or Daryl Dixon, the show established its place. And yes, it's a very big deal for the characters to stand so confidently, even when they were developed right from the start. So, things were going super well until Season 3. It was very refreshing to see something so radically different from what fans had gotten used to. But then, in Season 4, Morgan Jones came into the spin-off. He was shortly followed by Dwight and Sherry, too. Do you see where the problem truly began? Not only did this entire ordeal destroy the distinction between the two shows, but it also confused fans to no end. I mean, what were the odds for all of these characters to realistically end up in the same universe? Of course, they got desperate to make connections in impossible ways. As they tried to make the original Walking Dead characters fit into the spin-off, the story just became too tacky to handle. They probably saw how the show was losing its relevance, and in my opinion, ending it was the best decision they could have ever made. But the declining ratings weren't the only reason. The franchise is simply getting too crowded. When I say that people love The Walking Dead, it's kind of an understatement, because it's the fans' demands that have led to 3 whole spin-offs being in production right now. Not to mention there's a dormant show as well as Anne Rice's Immortal Universe, all of which are being streamed on AMC. So technically, there's no space to begin with. But even if you put that fact aside, it all just sounds like an unnecessary overload of zombie apocalyptic universes. And while I agree that the original idea was brilliant, it's just starting to get a bit much now. Fear the Walking Dead saved itself before it started to become overkill. These were all the real reasons why the show is reaching its end.